Welcome to Standard 16A. In the standard, we're going to try and identify contemporary political issues with emphasis on migration of refugees, the ethnic and religious conflicts in the world, and the impact of technology. By contemporary, we mean today, in the current modern world. Some essential understanding to help us with this standard is that the developed and developing nations, both rich and poor countries in the world, face many challenges, and these include migrations or the movement of people, ethnic and religious conflicts, and figuring out how to best use the many new technologies that we have for their good aspects and not abuse them for their bad aspects. The essential question we're attempting to answer here, we actually have two. The first is what new technologies have created opportunities and challenges as well. In other words, what's the good and the bad of the technologies that we have access to today? Okay, the first one, and for a lot of you, you've been born into this technological world, but if you talk to your parents and people who are older than yourselves, they're very much aware of how quickly technology has changed. We have widespread but unequal access to both computers and other forms of instantaneous communications. By widespread, we mean they're in many different places. Not all the technology is in one location. For example, not all technology is in the United States. It's spread out. You can find cell phones, computers, video games around the world. And by instantaneous, we mean immediate or right away. Your friend gets an A on a math test and you're sitting in history class, you know about it 2 seconds later when they text you. Or when news takes place in a foreign country on some other side of the world, we know about it within 5 minutes on a news channel. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here. The technology is very common, but it's unequal in its distribution. For example, this would be a very common scene in the halls here at Herndon. Okay, students lined up with their phones, texting away in their own world, but that isn't everywhere. Okay, in other words, you can find students doing that on all continents, but some places have more access to technology than others. We look at this map here and we see the countries in darker brown have higher ratio of computers to people. Okay, countries like the United States, Canada, Germany, Australia, South Korea, Japan, you have well over a computer for every 2 people. In many of these countries, you have a computer for almost every single person. Okay, some of the lighter yellow countries on the map here, we see less than 1 computer for every 20 people. So a lot less computer ownership. Here we see the most and the least connected countries in the world. We see a country like Iceland where 90% of the people in the country are connected online. We also have some other countries in the world, countries like Bangladesh, countries like Ethiopia, where it's less than 1% of people are online. Okay, another area where we see these benefits and challenges is in the medical field with genetic engineering and what we call bioethics. Genetic engineering is using our scientific technology to change the DNA of a living thing. Okay, for example, changing the DNA in a person to prevent a possible disease. We also have issues, should parents be able to change the color of their children's eyes, kind of things. Bioethics refers to those kinds of questions. It's the morality that these advances in science and technology bring. The science and technology is there, but does that mean that we should actually use these things? For example, injecting food products, changing the seeds to make bigger food products, or maybe disease-resistant, tampering with nature, might produce more food to feed hungry people, but does that come with other costs? That's what bioethics deals with. Cloning would be another example. Is it ethical? Is it moral to clone another you, to use your genetic code to create another you? ooh, spooky. We have an example here from South Korea where scientists altered the genetic code of cats to make them glow in the dark, and this one's kind of freaking me out. I suppose in ways it could be a good thing. Cat more visible in the dark maybe doesn't get hit by a car. Okay, but at the same time, is that science's role to make cats glow in the dark? Those are the kinds of things that bioethics deal with. Polls like this, is it ethical or moral to let parents choose the traits in their children? Again, those types of choices are possible. The science exists, whether it's to cure a possible genetic illness or genetic condition, or are they more cosmetic things, like we said, change the color hair or the color eyes of a child? These are all questions that bioethics deal with, and these are questions that previous generations didn't have to deal with. The technology didn't exist, but these are questions for us in today's world. Okay, another area of essential questions that we have here: what are some challenges faced in the contemporary world today? Okay, our first one here, these are some of the more challenging questions. One has to do with human migration, and by migration we mean the movement of people from one place to another. Conflict around the world creates situations and conditions where people need to flee. Wars break out, not even just wars, but famines, periods of hunger, periods of drought, where people have to leave, and that creates large numbers of refugees. And these are people who leave their homes in search of safety, people leaving countries to get out of war zones, people leaving to find more food, find more water. Maybe they're being persecuted for their religion or their language. Whatever the issue is, they're leaving in a search to get safe. Okay, they're not safe where they are. Okay, and that creates issues. People crossing borders into new countries. They might not have a place to actually go. Countries that might want to help, but they have scarce resources. We have lots of people moving across borders in the world today. We see here on these maps and charts, at least in 2010, where these refugees come from in the largest numbers. We can see, at least in 2010, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Somalia were the three countries that produced the most refugees. Okay, all three of these were countries that in 2010 were enduring wars and conflicts within their borders. So we see in these cases millions of people fleeing those countries to find safety in other countries. Now we'd probably have to add Syria to that list. I don't see Syria, but with the conflict there in Syria, it's another area producing a large number of refugees. Okay, another migration is taking form in the world in the form of guest workers, largely in Europe. We have people moving to European cities to do the work that Europeans themselves aren't able to do, in a lot of cases because of declining population. We see here, for example, Germany. Germany is sort of noted for having a big guest worker program. Our chart here shows us workers from Italy, Portugal, and Greece flocking to Germany in larger and larger numbers. Historically, that number has been largest from Turkey. Okay, the Turks have been moving to Germany in large numbers really since World War II. Okay, as Germany's population has gone down, foreign workers who aren't granted full citizenship, but they're allowed to legally be in the country to work. Now Germany has a large population of second generation Turks. We see not only are they doing work in Germany, they're also changing the culture. Okay, Turkish food like kebabs here are quickly becoming close to the national dish in Germany. Okay, so many people from Turkey moving there to Germany. That trend is probably going to continue. As we look at the red line here, we notice Germany's population, along with countries like Italy, is going down very steadily. Okay, the German population isn't increasing at all, and in fact by 2050 it's projected to be 10 million less than it is today. Another reason why guest workers will continue moving to Europe. Okay, we also have a number of ethnic and religious conflicts around the world. We have, for example, in the Middle East, the conflict between Israelis who are predominantly Jewish and Palestinians who are predominantly Muslim, although not exclusively. There are Christian Palestinians as well for control over Israel here. Okay, we can see here in these maps that prior to World War II, the red indicates Palestinian areas. World War II and the Holocaust create a need to move the Jewish population from Europe, both a desire by Jews in Europe and by European governments to move Jewish people out of Europe. And the decision we see here in 1947, United Nations mandate to create a Jewish state in the Middle East. Okay, we see the map in 1947 and how progressively over time the map has become less red, less Palestinian, and more white, more Jewish areas. Okay, and that's created a conflict between the two groups. Okay, represented in this picture, we see a Jewish flag, an Israeli flag here in the foreground, a Palestinian flag in the background here, symbolizing the conflict between these two groups for the land. Likewise, we have religious conflict in Northern Ireland where Catholics and Protestants have been in conflict for a number of years. Even though geographically Northern Ireland is on the island of Ireland, politically it belongs to Great Britain. Okay, and we see here on our map the different religious groups, the green being the Catholics, the orange being the Protestants, and the areas that they are the majority groups in. Lots of scary murals like this throughout Belfast, one of the cities in Northern Ireland. And even though the tension has kind of gone down over the years, you do still see clashes like this between those who are Catholic and want to be part of Ireland and those who are Protestant and want to be part of Great Britain. Okay, we have in the Balkans, the southeastern part of Europe, highlighted here in the peach orange color. This area here is a very diverse, ethnically diverse area of Europe. We saw in World War I, this is where Sarajevo and the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand took place. After World War II, this area was largely dominated by a country called Yugoslavia. Okay, and in 1991, when that country broke up, it created a lot of tension between the various ethnic groups there. Okay, and there was a civil war in which the Serbian population fought the Bosnians, the Croats, the Kosovars. In Standard 12B, we learned about the genocide that took place of the Bosnians in this area. Even though that's not going on today, there's still high tension there. Okay, we also have tension in the Horn of Africa. And by the Horn of Africa, we're referring to this area over here in East Africa. I suppose if you look at it, it almost looks like a rhinoceros horn sticking out of the side of Africa there. We're looking here at countries like Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea. Okay, and we've had a long civil war that resulted in the formation of Eritrea, split off from Ethiopia. We've also had civil war for decades in Somalia. Okay, we had an Ethiopian civil war, we have a Somalian civil war, and sort of the chaotic situation that that's produced has resulted in the Somali pirates you may have heard of off the coast of Somalia. Okay, and then our last ethnic religious conflict we have here is in Southern Asia, where we have really for the past 60, almost 70 years, tension between largely Hindu India and largely Muslim Pakistan. The border areas there have produced a couple of conflicts, so much so that India even developed camouflage here back in the 1970s for the Taj Mahal. Okay, we have very tense border ceremony every day between India and Pakistan. We also have had conflict between largely Hindu and largely Buddhist populations on the island of Sri Lanka, also known as Ceylon, where civil war has gone on for over 30 years. Okay, and that concludes what we need to know for Standard 16A.